Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today I wanted to talk about the best school combinations to quest through the game with other people. Now the reason why is I was looking back through my most viewed videos in the last month to see, which ones got the most views of my past videos, because obviously a lot of my past videos, things that were made in 2021 and 2022, aren't really good, but they still get views because, they are like some of the only guide videos for this game, and they're some of the most popular guide videos for this game, so a lot of people will click on them, but they do kind of suck. And I was looking through them, and this one, the school combination video, was actually towards the top, obviously from people wanting to know what should I quest through the game with my friends, and kind of to figure out, what's the best school combos to quest with. And I was rewatching that video and I was like, damn, this kind of sucks, not gonna lie. It wasn't the worst video in the world. Like, obviously what I said still rings true, but I don't think it was necessarily a good video. So today I wanted to remake the video and remake it in a higher quality and go over the funnest school combos and the best school combos you can get through this game with. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, starting off, let's talk about the best school combos in this game. And I'm going to start off with saying that life and any hitting school is probably going to be by far the best school combo you can go for. Obviously, life has a massive amount of heals, and they get heals incredibly early. Like, one of the first spells they ever get is a 0 pip 230 healing spell, which honestly can carry you through even the first 2 or 3 worlds. That's not even mentioning the fact that they get fairy instead of the pixie that everyone gets, which is 420 health to anyone for 2 pips. They get unicorn later on, and then they get satyr, and then they can even learn Pigsy. If you get the Pigsy spell elements, they can learn Pigsy, which is going to be so good. 4 pips for like 700 healing is going to be insane. That's like a satyr but to all people. Life is just incredibly good, and it's going to be especially good when it's paired with a hitting school. Now specifically, I think that storm, fire, and myth are going to be really good with life, because those schools have some of the lesser health in the game. Especially storm has the least amount of health in the game, so when they're getting hit, they're going to be getting hit hard, and with a life you can obviously heal them and prevent them from dying. So that's going to mean your storm wizard, who only has like 2,000 health while you have like 4,000 health, isn't going to be dying constantly when they're questing through the game. It takes away storm's major weakness, and obviously fire and myth have it too, but to a lesser extent, and it really makes those hitting schools all that much more essential, because in a battle they're not going to be dying, and they're going to be able to do that massive amount of damage without having to worry risking death constantly. Now, I'd say life isn't as good if you pair them with ice, obviously, because ice isn't particularly a massive hitting school, and their entire purpose is to have a massive amount of health and a big amount of resist. So if they're getting to a low health anyway, they're probably not the best ice in the world. With an ice, life is probably going to be one of the last combos you really need. With a balance and a death, it's obviously to a lesser extent. Like, death has their heal back spells, so they're not going to be needing healing as much, and balance obviously is mainly a support school, so obviously they might need healing, but they might not need it as much as, say, like a storm would, and it's not going to be as valuable in a school combo. So life and anything, I think, is really good, and you're never going to go wrong having a life in your team when it comes to healing. All right, next up, in a similar vein, let's talk about balance. I think balance with any hitting school is also really good. In my last few videos ranking the schools, I talked about the fact that balance is kind of the weakest school in this game. However, in a team setting, balance is probably the best school in the game. The ability to buff anyone to a massive extent is just going to be really good. If you didn't know, for some reason, balance blade, you can use it on any school, and any school will be able to use it, as opposed to, like, an ice blade isn't going to work on a fire, but a balance blade will work on a fire. So that means that for the hitting schools like storm, fire, myth, death, you're going to be exceptionally good when it comes to duoing with a balance, because a balance will be able to blade you and put up traps and whatever that are universal, and those universal traps and blades are going to be so good at getting through the game. It's just going to make any hitting school all that much more better. And if you have 3 people and you do a balance, a life, and then a hitting school, you're going to be getting through the game so easily. Like, I'm talking about breezing through the game. Obviously for the life, whenever your teammates are low, you can heal them, the balance can blade the hitter, and then the hitter will just breeze through the game, having 2 supports questing with them at the same time. Now obviously balance isn't going to be the best when it comes to like an ice wizard who isn't really going to be doing a massive amount of damage, a life wizard who could, do damage. There's nothing wrong with a life and a balance. I don't think it's going to be weak. I just don't think it's as strong as a hitting school. And then obviously a balance with another balance is going to actually be like kind of a weaker combo, because they just have 2 balance blades just blading each other up and probably not doing as much damage as if you had a hitter. A balance with a non-hitter is probably going to be pretty bad, but I don't think it's going to be like the end of the world bad. And if you do have like a balance with a life or an ice, it's not going to be horrible. All right, so real fast in the last section of the, what are the best, I'm going to talk about school combos where it is your school and the opposite. So for example, fire, ice, myth, storm, life, death. I do think that these are some of the best school combos you can go for because obviously you kind of cover each other's weaknesses. I will say I don't think that these are the best to go for. Specifically, storm and myth isn't really a good combo because they don't really have the best synergy between them. But I do think that the other two are pretty decent. Fire has lower health but good hits, and then an ice can shield them, whatnot. And then obviously a life and a death is just going to be busted because you're both going to be at full health at all times. Generally, I do think these are some of the better school combos you can go for. I don't think they're the best in the game, but they are decent enough. All right, now that we've talked about the best school combos in the game, I want to talk about some of the funnest school combos in the game. These are going to be the school combos where I don't think they're particularly good, like they aren't the best, but they do get through the game in an incredibly funny way, and it's going to be fun to quest with them. These are going to be the ones where you might not want to be going for optimum. You just want to quest through the game and have like a funny and fun time doing it. So let's get into it. First off, let's talk about Storm and Storm. This one's going to be your classic, you are going to be blasting literally every enemy in the game. Obviously, you're both kind of weak because you have a low amount of health, but generally, this isn't going to be a bad combo. If you're questing with another Storm on a Storm, you guys are just going to be blowing through every enemy in the game. It's basically bringing 2 nuclear bombs to a coughing baby instead of 1 nuclear bomb. The baby is going to be obliterated massively rather than just obliterated. So I think 2 storms is just kind of a funny combo. And if you didn't know, I did a live playthrough with my friend Formal Phantom 2 years ago now. It's been 2 years. That's kind of crazy. We went through the game, and most of the game that is, with 2 storm wizards. We got all the way up to Chrysalis, and it genuinely was some of the funnest times I've had questing through this game, just because it's so funny to just curb stomp literally every enemy in the game. And obviously it just breezes through the game. It's just a fun combo, and it's not good, but I do think it's funny, and I think that's what matters. Now, in a similar vein to that, there's 2 other schools in themselves that I think work really well. For example, 2 deaths is also kind of funny because both of you are going to be at full health at basically all times. You just spam heal back spells. You're going to be just breezing through the game at full health. It's not going to be particularly insanely good, but obviously I think that it's decent enough, and you're both going to be at full health. You're not going to be ever losing health because of your heal back spells. And obviously death is a decent support school. They're a decent hitting school, and they have good survivability. So death with itself is going to be pretty decent. It's probably not one of the ones I'd recommend because I think it's not going to be the funnest to do, but I do think it is a funny school combo and you can do it. Let's get into the last one, and I think this one's going to just be full meme potential. It has no actual value, but I think it's really funny, and that's a myth with itself. And I think that the reason why is that if you have a myth with another myth and you just spam summon minions early game, it's going to be so funny. I don't think it's going to particularly be good, especially in the later game. It's not going to be that good. It's not going to have the same potential a storm and a storm would have, and you're just going to be 2 kind of not the best hitting schools in the game, but not the worst, and you're not going to have the best support either. I think that it's not going to be horrible, and you can get through Arc 1 just by summoning minions. It's going to be so funny to get through the game that way, and I do think it has some of the memeiest potential out of all the school combos. If anyone does do myth with themselves and they just summon minions, let me know in the comments because I really like to know how it goes. I feel like in Arc 1 it could just be a blast just seeing what the summoned minion does, if there's 2 of them, can you beat the entirety of Arc 1 just with that? Because I feel like you could, and I want to know. I think it'd be funny. Obviously minions fall off after Arc 1, so it might not be useful after that, but I do think it would be at least funny to go through Arc 1 with that. All right, we're going to talk about one last fun combo before I get into the school combos I think that you shouldn't do, and that is Storm with Death. Now, I've done this one once in the past with one of my friends, and let me just tell you, this one's funny for all the wrong reasons. This one isn't a particularly good school combo. Obviously, as a Death, you have the ability to blade and heal your Storm, but I think it's funniest if you don't do that. You might be asking why? I think it's so funny if you see a Storm Wizard at very low health constantly and, struggling to get through the game hitting and having low health, and then just being at full health as a Death the whole time. Now, that might just be my sick and twisted sense of humor, thinking of the Hamburger Helper guy right now. Genuinely, I think it's so funny being on a Death, being at full health at all times and hitting, and then seeing your Storm friend just die constantly. Maybe that's me. I think that is me, but I think it's funny in a sick and sadistic way instead of actually being good and genuinely funny to get through the game with. And I remember questing through Azteca with a Death and a Storm, and it was just constantly the Storm was dying to full pip storm owls, and I was like lol lamau as I was at full health at all times. So I think it's funny, but it's not particularly good. Now, before I get on to the bad school combos, I want to just talk about death as a school for a second. Now, I do think that death obviously works pretty well with a balance, and I do think that death as a support school can work for any other school. Obviously, they have Dark Pact and they have Sacrifice, which are both going to be really good if you're, with a fire, a myth, or a storm. But I don't think that they're particularly as good as a life or balance when synergizing with hitting schools, and I think the reason is death generally inherently is a very selfish school. Their heal back spells are obviously designed for them, to heal them back. The whole point of a death is to get through the game while hitting and then being at full health. And I think that generally that's going to be very good for soloing, and obviously it's the best school in the game, but combo wise, I think that death is actually one of the weaker schools to quest with. I think that obviously a balance works really well, but every other school, it's kind of like, should I quest a death with that other school? Probably not. Like a life, it doesn't really have a purpose because a life doesn't need to heal them. And then every other school, like as a death, you want to be hitting. So like realistically compare that to like a storm or a fire or like a myth with them. They're also going to want to be hitting. It's just not really the best synergy school with other schools. And I think that does make death a weaker duo school combo. Now, that's not to say that they're bad. Obviously, death can be one of the best support schools in the game. Again, they do have Dark Pact and Sacrifice, and they have other spells as well that synergize really well with other schools. But I just think inherently compared to some of the other support schools, it's just not as good as some of those schools. Now, finally, I want to talk about Ice with other schools because I do think that unfortunately Ice is kind of in a state where, obviously they kind of need to duo school with someone because Ice doesn't do a lot of damage, but I don't think that Ice is particularly as good of a support school as schools such as Balance and Life. And the reason is that particularly Ice doesn't really get anything that useful. Like they get shields, but shields aren't good late game because most enemies have a lot of Pierce anyway. So like, maybe as an Ice you'll be good on the earlier game, later game not going to be as good of a school combo. And I think that generally, Ice is weaker in terms of supporting. You don't have heals, you don't really have blades, and it kind of just makes Ice feel a little bit weaker than most other schools in the school combo. But that doesn't mean it's bad. If you want to quest through the game on an Ice with another wizard, that's not going to be saying that it's bad. It's just not as good as some other support schools with a hitter school. So I think generally that's it for this video. I kind of went over the best ones, the funnest ones, and then the worst ones. I think that generally, obviously, a hitter school and a support school is just going to be your best friend. And then every other school, you can duo with them. It's up to you. But I think that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you found to be the funnest if you've quested through the game with other people. Again, personally, I found Storm and Storm to be really fun and Storm and Death to be pretty fun. I would like to know though, like what schools do you find the funnest to quest through the game with and which ones are the best? This is going to be it for today. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic day, and thank you all for watching.